Chapter 661. Bruce's defeat had lost them their last line of support. There was no stopping Wilbur now that they refused to admit what they had done. But admitting to the scheme would be digging their own grave too. Even the businessmen and cultivators in this ruin would tear them down, let alone Leonard and Wilbur. The target of the scheme was Leonard, but they had fooled everyone else here in the meantime. Things were not going to end well for them now that Bruce was down. Just then, the rest of the businessmen and cultivators were returning to their senses bit by bit. If Bruce had the nerve to scam Leonard, would that not make them far easy victims? These people in power hardly cared about them, hatching up a scheme this elaborate to fool everyone. The crowd began to murmur among themselves. These murmurs grew louder and louder, turning into shouts and complaints. Amon, Reed, and Brody turned pale as ghosts, unsure of what to do. John let out a sigh, getting to his feet. "Ladies and gentlemen, I admit that Bruce and Eliam created this scheme to target Leonard's herb fields and invited me to join them. I gave in to pressure and temptation and agreed to do it. I'm deeply sorry to everyone, and I accept the punishment this man and Mr. Thatcher might sentence me to. After that." John turned to Wilbur and Leonard before bowing deeply. The crowd scoffed coldly but stopped letting out their anger on John now that he had apologized. Wilbur was about to say something when a peal of raised laughter broke out somewhere in the room. The crowd looked over in shock. Bruce was slowly climbing to his feet, laughing like a maniac. He punched a hole in the safe next to him and took out a box. Bruce broke through the box covered in runes, taking out something from within. He held it in his palm and continued to laugh. "How dare you question me? You foolish bastards! You have no right. And you," Bruce whipped around to face Wilbur, "you're sanctuary-level cultivator, aren't you? That's pretty remarkable, and have to say I'm impressed. But you're dead wrong if you think you're going to beat me. Let me show you what true power looks like. You're all going to be crushed." At the same time, the thing Bruce was holding onto began to emit a terrifying wave of energy that enveloped the entire room. It made everyone gasp for air. Their expressions creased with agony. Bruce, while absorbing the energy from the thing he was holding, began to grow at an alarming rate. In a matter of seconds, he had turned into a giant over 5 meters tall. Bruce's body was burning brightly with terrifying spiritual flames. These flames were covered in runes as an overwhelming wave of spiritual pressure washed over the crowd. Everyone bowed over in pain, and some even collapsed to the ground. "Help! Help!" the crowd began to cry out in agony. Bruce was still laughing like a madman. He pressed whatever he had been holding to his chest, seemingly absorbing its energy. The spiritual pressure coming from his body was growing more and more terrifying, and everyone, including Amon and the rest, had collapsed to the ground. No one knew that Bruce was capable of such a terrifying move. It was clear that he had lost his mind completely and was going to take everyone out here. Wilbur was still staring at Bruce's new form in disbelief. "Bro," Leonard wheezed in agony, "do something, or we're going to die." Wilbur snapped out of his stupor at that, shouting, "How dare Yoel!" As he spoke, Wilbur's body lit up with spiritual flames as he shot toward Bruce like a bullet. Chapter 662. A deafening sound rang through the air. Wilbur collided with Bruce's arms, both of them crashing through the walls and falling over 10 stories down. Wilbur landed on both feet, leaving a deep well in the ground. Bruce was far more terrifying, his landing leaving a crater in the ground over a few meters wide. He continued to laugh, staring at Wilbur with bloodshot eyes. "How dare you ruin my plan? You imbecile. I'm going to kill you." "Oh, there's no rush for that. Could you tell me where you got that from first?" Wilbur was practically drooling as he stared at the crystal bane lodged in Bruce's chest. That was a crystal bone for sure, just like the one the chairman of Pentagon Group had gifted him in defeat. It was the perfect offering Wilbur was desperate to get his hands on. What he did not understand, however, was how someone like Bruce had gotten his hands on something so terrifying. Could it be pure coincidence or fate? Wilbur wanted nothing more than to figure out where these bones came from. He would hit the jackpot if he managed to get his hands on a few crystal bones like this one. Yet just then, Bruce was already charging toward him. Bruce's gigantic feet left behind terrifying footprints on the ground with every step he took. His hands had morphed into long spears, covered in runes as they burned brightly with spiritual flames. The crowd had just escaped his terrifying pressure from earlier. When they heard the sound of the monstrous footsteps from beneath, they peeped out of the windows in terror and saw Bruce charging at Wilbur like a feral bull. The crowd's chests lurched from the sight. Everyone knew that Wilbur was going to have to win, or they would all be done for. They all said a silent prayer for him. Just then, Wilbur had pulled out his thunder cleaver in retaliation to Bruce's gigantic form. Almost all at once, Bruce had managed to stab at Wilbur almost 100 times as he growled. Bruce was currently moving with such a terrifying speed power that was hardly visible to the naked eye. However, Wilbur's spirit energy made it possible for him to observe every little thing close up, including Bruce's rapid-fire attacks. Wilbur brandished his thunder cleaver in a counterattack, and both parties broke out into a fierce battle at once. Their exchange kicked up a wild gust of wind within 10-meter radius around them, with spiritual flames and energy rampant in a torrid hurricane. The people upstairs could hardly see either of them. All they caught sight of was Bruce's gigantic figure, whipping his spear-like arms through the air in bursts of explosive sounds with every move. Wilbur himself turned into a ball of blinding light, darting around Bruce's body in circles. His terrifying weapon swung dangerously, letting out bone-chilling sounds and terrifying crashes. The battle was a terrifying sight, leaving sinking feeling in everyone who caught a glimpse of it. Bruce was hardly human at this point. His gigantic form, along with the runes craving covering the spirit flames lighting up the spears he now had for arms, made him look more like a feral beast, destroying everything in its path. Wilbur refused to back down as well, whipping his thunder cleaver through the air as he were the personification of the lightning god himself. This was enough of a threat to Bruce, who could not help but dodge the attacks. The stray waves of spirit energy from the battle made the ground quake every now and then as if it was going to crumble. No one dared to go downstairs, knowing that facing up against Bruce's new form would only result in their death.